We have another really big update from the NHL waiver wire. Today we have more players on waivers for teams like Montreal, Ottawa, Detroit, Nashville, and more. And we have a signing. Nikita Gusev is now a member of the Florida Panthers. We'll discuss all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now we're just over a day away here from the NHL trade deadline, and teams are certainly making moves here today with NHL waivers to either free up cap space, make players more attractive to be traded because they've cleared waivers, etc. And there's a fair bit of activity here. Now before we jump into today's waiver news, as I mentioned, we have a signing to discuss here as well. We saw Nikita Gusev go through unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination the other day. So of course he was trying to get signed again before Monday's trade deadline so that he'd be eligible to play for a playoff team, which is what his intent was, to try to sign with one of the teams that are destined to make the playoffs here. So he has signed on with the Florida Panthers. Now, we had heard last night from some of the NHL insiders that they were the leading contender, so that's not a huge surprise. Obviously, Florida's been a busy team here. They just acquired Brandon Montour yesterday, and now they add Nikita Gusev. I'm not sure to say if they're done or not. They could still have some more activity here yet, but they've signed Gusev on a one-year deal, so it's just for the remainder of the year at $1 million. So it'll be prorated for the remainder of the season, and since he signed before Monday, he can play in the playoffs. So that's a nice, free, easy pickup, really, for Florida without having to give up any assets there. I mean, Gusev, his first year in New Jersey, he thought was pretty solid, put up 44 points, but this year he's not been overly great. His point totals are way down. I mean, he's kind of viewed upon as pretty much being a one-dimensional kind of winger, kind of like a Mike Hoffman, except Hoffman tends to score more goals, but in the sense that you don't really get really good defensive play at all. It's very one-dimensional, except this year, the one dimension he normally had been good at before with the scoring touch was just way down. So obviously he'll be looking to rebound, and maybe we can see him play with some stronger players in a team like Florida. Like, for example, look at Evgeny Dadonov, who played in Florida, getting top 6 minutes regularly with guys like Huberdeau and Barkov, and was a solid 50-60 point player for quite some time. He goes to Ottawa, and his production there is pretty decent, but he's been a little bit more streaky and not quite to the level that it was in Florida. So playing with great players can certainly improve your stats, and it can, if you can fit in and fit nicely, it could be a good fit. I mean, look at Alex Galchenyuk in Toronto, same idea. He's not exactly letting it up. He's got like 6 points, but he's been a nice little, complimentary piece to play in the top 6, and it's working out for a cheap price. So we'll see if Gusev can accomplish something similar here with Florida. Yesterday we had 2 players from the Penguins added to the waiver wire, which was Colton Seaver as well as Juuso Riikola. Now, they have both cleared. So they both remain with the Penguins, and they can be reassigned. So obviously, nothing really going there. Now, today we have some more interesting names, and to be honest, I would be surprised if we get through this one without there being at least 1, maybe 2 claims. So let's take a look at who's on waivers today. We have the Ottawa Senators placing defenseman Cody Golobeuf on waivers. Now, this is a different situation. He's been with the team at the American Hockey League level, but on an AHL-only contract. So now he's being signed to an NHL two-way deal, so he'd be eligible to be called up. So he will need waivers for that process to be fully completed. So he's on waivers for that purpose. Probably unlikely that he gets claimed, but I guess you never know. But he has not played in the NHL this year and has limited amount of NHL experience in the past, so he probably stays in the Sens organization. We do have a couple of other interesting defensemen though. We have Victor Mete of the Montreal Canadiens and Sami Vatanen of the New Jersey Devils. I think are the most likely guys to be claimed here. I mean, Victor Mete's been a player that's been discussed a lot this year. I mean, we heard from Elliot Friedman earlier back probably like a month or 6 weeks ago or whatever it was now, that Victor Mete wanted a change of scenery, wanted more opportunity, and had requested that the Habs consider trading him. And of course, at that point, Marc Bergevin basically denied that and said he wasn't going to trade him and seen him as being somebody they want to keep around. And obviously, there's been some talk that he could be included in any trades that the Habs consider making here ahead of the deadline. And now he's on waivers. He's a restricted free agent next year, so obviously, there's no long-term commitment here. He's not making a lot of money, so I would think the teams out there that are looking for blue line help, like, you know, a team like Boston, like Winnipeg, for example. Those are the two of the ones that jump out. We know that there's other teams out there looking for blue line help, but they might want something a little bit more specific here. I'd be shocked if they don't give the young Victor Mete a chance. I mean, he hasn't had a major opportunity in Montreal, and I think he could flourish if given more opportunities. Same goes for Sami Vatanen. I mean, he's certainly a player that it was a late signing, played with New Jersey before, ended up coming back to them on a short-term contract. Certainly another guy who could be helpful to teams wanting to add blue line depth ahead of the playoffs here. I mean, Sami Vatanen's been around the league a fair bit of time now. Doesn't have a ton of money on his contract, so you never know. I would think that at least one of those two guys are pretty likely to be claimed. Now, in the case of Mete in Montreal, that just kind of, I think, reassures us here that Marc Bergevin is shopping for blue line help. We've talked about that before in some of our trade rumor type videos, where it's been rumored that the Habs are looking to make an addition here on the blue line. One last move here for Bergevin before the playoffs start. I think they're solid in goal. They made lots of additions up front, and they've already added Eric Stahl. They got Cole Caulfield to sign out of college, and he's been tearing it up in the brief amount of time he's played in the AHL. So he's available for call-up. I think they're fine when it comes to forwards. They could maybe move a forward. It is possible. A guy like maybe Lehkonen is the most likely if they do need to free up any additional cap space. And then, of course, Mete as well here. So I think they want to add another top six blue liner, maybe even somebody who can play, you know, more minutes than just third pair. It just depends on what's available out there. I mean, if it's with the names that have already moved, though, I think the blue line trade market there's still some good names out there, but it's not super deep. So it'll be interesting to see which direction they go. I mean, maybe a guy like Jamie Alexiak in Dallas is an interesting name that could move. He could go to a variety of teams out there, like the ones I mentioned, maybe Montreal as well. So we'll have to remain to be seen. But this just, for me, gives me that much more likelihood that they're certainly looking to trade for a defenseman here. Now, of course, we also have a couple of guys from the Red Wings organization. We have Danny Dekeyser and Alex Biega. Dekeyser still has more term on his contract. Plus, he's making more than the other guys. Probably unlikely that he gets claimed. I believe he already went through waivers a while back as well. So, and he wasn't claimed then. So, probably doesn't get claimed now. Biega, you never know. Again, some of these guys on cheaper contracts are easier to be picked up for blue line depth ahead of the playoffs. So maybe, but I'd be a little bit more surprised if one of those two were claimed over either Vatanen or Mete. Now, we also have defenseman Josh Healy as well from the Nashville Predators organization, and I believe it's the same situation with Cody Golobeuf, that he's looking to be signed here to an NHL two-way deal because he has been playing in the AHL already. So I believe that's what they're looking to do here, is to sign him. He needs waivers to complete that. So I believe that's all they're doing here. So again, another guy with really no NHL experience, minor leaguer, getting a two-way deal. Probably doesn't get picked up either, but there's still some very interesting names. And like I said, with some of these guys like Mete, Vatanen, Biega, Dekeyser, even if they aren't claimed, it just makes them more attractive in a trade for tomorrow. Obviously, tomorrow at noon Eastern, we have the waivers will be determined if they're cleared or picked up, and they will still have a few hours after that to be traded before the NHL trade deadline is completed here, so that the acquiring team will have the flexibility of not necessarily putting them on their NHL roster. They could place them on their taxi squad or even in the minors and be eligible to be called up later if they don't have the space to put them on there immediately. So they can be added as extra depth but not count on their cap right away. So we'll see what happens, but certainly some interesting names have gone through the waivers here in the past few days. I would imagine the players going through waivers are probably going to calm down here a little bit once the trade deadline passes, but there's still possible that we could see players being picked up, just not quite as much, but there's still be a little bit of activity here and there. So let me know your thoughts on these players on waivers today, if they're going to get claimed. Where do you think some good landing spots for them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.